Ladies, gentlemen, and Herodrum of all ages, as we progress through another sort of seasonal holiday event period in Diablo 4, I find myself just completely indifferent to the whole thing, honestly, and asking why this is even still a thing in its current state. From the beginning of the release of the game, they clearly have wanted to make a thing out of middle of the season seasonal or holiday type events, sort of bonus reasons to log in during the more down periods of play within a season, trying to bring players in to play a bit more with the promise of some special unique rewards. And as a concept, I think that's totally fine. It's a good thing. It has potential, of course, but the actual result of these in each iteration since the release of the game has generally been quite lackluster. The main one people talk a lot about is the one that's of course going on right now, the Midwinter Blight. This, in its initial iteration, added a singular new event to the event pool in the Fractured Peaks, but it did also add a new sort of little enemy type for the Fractured Peaks during this time period too. There was a small bit of meat to this event, but it didn't really affect general gameplay at all or change the way most players interacted with the game outside of the elixir from the event itself being relatively strong. It was fine, but it missed the mark on its main purpose, which is bringing players back in to play more than they would have otherwise. On top of this, the event also promised a bunch of unique cosmetics for each class, which it did deliver on, but now this event has returned for a second time in Season 6, and it brings some pretty strange questions with it. The event itself has changed, so it no longer really has the unique enemy type and the unique events in the Fractured Peaks as well, and instead the Red Cloaked Horror boss has a chance to replace things like Hellborn spawning during Helltide as a boss, which is fine, but it just doesn't really change your gameplay much at all, especially when the majority of active players at this point in the season are just in strong enough builds to basically one-shot it anyways when it does show up, so you don't even get a different combat experience either. The other main complaint about the return of this event is that the unique cosmetics are exactly the same as last year. There is nothing new to actually earn or strive for with the original 5 classes. It's all the same ones that we had before, and even more confusing than that is that spiritborn, a new class, has been added to the game this year, and it doesn't have any cosmetics to gain through this event, which makes it feel very strange that they're even bringing it back, honestly. It feels like very little effort was put into this event returning. They knew it was a holiday season, so they thought they had to bring it back because they knew they had a pre-existing holiday event already. They reworked it to make it less special than it was before somehow, and then stuck it in without adding anything new with it. The game is making so many positive changes. I want to point that out. It's getting better in so many different ways, and I don't want to dismiss that as a concept, but the more positive the other systems in the game look, the more glaring and disappointing certain things are like this, and especially in comparison, it's much worse as far as I'm concerned. The other events that followed the Midwinter Blight were the Lunar Awakening, which made shrines more plentiful and gave us some slightly altered shrines as well, and again, this was fine as a concept, but wasn't really enticing enough to get most people to continue playing the game more. The concept for this one was better, in my opinion, than Midwinter Blight, and I think if they had made more significant changes to the shrines to make them more like into a minigame or something, maybe make it so every shrine is a cursed shrine, so you get that extra sort of wave-based minigame, but the actual powers from the shrine are insanely stronger and more different, like maybe something like now your ultimate skills have no cooldown or something silly like that. That would of course be insane if we had it in the game full-time, but would be at least a little bit of fun for the 2 weeks or so that an event like this would normally run for. Then you could of course lock off things like these special shrines so they don't appear in like competitive content like pit runs if you feel the need to block them off from that too. As for the Midwinter Blight, my main changes that I would make would be bringing back the unique world event from before and probably adding in at least a handful more unique events too, essentially making it so every event in the Fractured Peak is just rotating between these seasonal only events that only exist for this 2-week period to actually make them played, and then make them do something like give a bunch of bonus opals as well compared to normal events, something to incentivize players to actually experience these events and go out and seek them. And then just, hey, if you do returning events in the future, if you bring them back, please add more cosmetics to them. I know the teams are busy, they have lots of stuff that they're doing, but if you want these seasonal events to feel special, if you want them to be meaningful to players, you do have to make them feel special. That said, the other main seasonal event that we've had is Meet or Treat, which happened around Halloween, and this also affected shrines like the Lunar Awakening event, but it did it in much smaller ways, and also gave shrines a small chance to summon the Butcher as well. And this was probably the smallest effect that any of these 3 events have had overall, but I don't mind it. It had a short duration, it wasn't like bigged up to be something more than it wasn't trying to bring players back in, it was just a nice tiny little bonus that came with some free cosmetics for all the people that were still playing the game because it was the month of the release of a new expansion and the season, and I think that's a fine addition when it does exactly as is promised. The main thing I think every one of these events could benefit from though, honestly, is decorations. Throw up an alternate version of like Kyovashad for each one of them happening. Decorate the town with Christmassy holiday cheer for the Midwinter Blight. Decorate it with like Chinese lanterns or something like that for Lunar Awakening. Decorate it with spiderwebs and skeletons for Meet or Treat. Sure, it would would break some of the immersion in Kyovashad specifically, but these events have pretty much always only been on the seasonal realm regardless, and very few people who play seasonally play for the immersion. They play for the gameplay and the power fantasy. So I think this would end up being more appreciated than it is not. Though that said, there are two more things that are technically seasonal events to cover, but they are far more minimal. The first is Mother's Blessing. This is a pretty standard thing that happens every season around the midpoint to try and bring people back in. It increases experience rewards by a fair amount, so you can gain levels, and especially now paragon levels, at an increased rate. It increases gold gain as well, which is quite nice, but often not really the biggest deal compared to our normal gold gaining sources. It's just sort of a nice little quaint bonus effect that they turn on behind the scenes occasionally. I have no real complaints about Mother's Blessing. I think it's absolutely fine. It serves its purpose, and it gets people to do things like level alts too. The other thing that I want to bring up though is March of the Goblins, which has happened a couple of times now, and I think is my favorite event that they do generally, even though it's relatively simple. This increases treasure goblin spawn rates in general just everywhere across the map, and everyone loves treasure goblins, so this is obviously quite fun in itself. Not to mention this made greed shrines an actually really fun gameplay interaction, where treasure goblins would spawn as you were killing enemies with them active, and this creates a new mini game of trying to kill everything as quickly as physically possible when you found a greed shrine, and the only real way that I would improve this event for the future is making the greed shrines more prevalent to make this a larger impact on actual gameplay. Maybe even make it 50% spawn rate of the shrines will pop up as greed shrines instead of the other ones, again outside of the pit, as that is a more competitive activity where shrines are actually a bigger power difference. But let people interact with the fun short-term mechanic more purposefully and more frequently, and people just appreciate it more. As simple as that, as far as I'm concerned. Not to mention this event also adds a bunch of bag drops from the actual treasure goblins to add even more loot that drops from them, and everyone loves getting more loot. This is essentially the best event because it changes gameplay, it adds some more interesting moments, it makes you excited in various points, and you also get the bags full of surprise loot, and everyone loves more loot. All in all, these sort of short-term 2-week long events that happen pretty much every season, if not multiple within a season, are a good concept for sure. They are a fun idea, but I think for the most part they need a lot of work to feel like they're actually meaningful to the game rather than just some extra fluff they're adding in. And so today I just wanted to stop and talk about these events in their entirety, as well as the main changes that I would make personally to make them more engaging and more appreciated by players as well. But that's all just my own opinions really, so as usual, feel free to leave your own thoughts on any of this down in the comments section below too. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.